"You're just a burden," my son Liam said as he set down his fork, the words slicing through the quiet air like an unexpected winter chill. I looked at him, my hands resting on the edge of the mahogany dining table, feeling the worn surface beneath my fingertips, remembering how Robert and I had polished it together over decades of family dinners and quiet Sunday breakfasts. The sunlight filtered through the half-open blinds, casting slanted stripes across the empty chair where Robert had always sat, and the stillness of the house pressed against me. I did not respond. My voice remained caught somewhere between my chest and the silence that had stretched long after Robert's funeral, a week ago today. I kept my posture straight, my silver hair falling neatly over my shoulders, my blue eyes calm but steady, tracing the place settings for signs of life that no longer existed. Liam avoided my gaze, his expression tight, as though he feared revealing what he truly thought. Across the room, Emma, his wife of 12 years, arranged her napkin with precise movements, deliberately slow, as if timing her actions to draw out the tension. I let them speak, observing without interrupting, noting the subtle shifts of the room, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of floorboards that had held so many echoes of laughter and warmth now gone. I remembered the mornings after Robert passed, walking through the kitchen with a cup of tea, listening to the silence, noticing how the sunlight fell on the countertops, the faint scent of his cologne lingering faintly on the shelves. The grief was still fresh, a soft ache in my chest that I carried quietly. I traced back the conversations we had shared during our last year together, every smile, every gentle word, every plan Robert had whispered about the future, and contrasted them with the clipped tones and cold calculations I now observed from Liam and Emma. They spoke about the bills, about schedules, about the house, as if Robert's absence had dissolved all ties of care or respect. I allowed myself a slow exhale, feeling the tension in my shoulders, the tightness in my jaw, letting it settle into quiet observation rather than outburst. I noticed the photographs on the wall, the family gathered at holidays, birthday parties, vacation trips, frozen moments of happiness now weighed against the dissonance of this moment. Emma's eyes flickered briefly toward me, a glimmer of calculation quickly masked by a polite smile. I sipped from my teacup, savoring the warmth, the bitter edges, allowing the stillness to magnify the enormity of their audacity. Every small gesture, every word, every calculated pause was a piece of a larger puzzle I had begun to understand, the shift of loyalty, the subtle erasure of my presence. I kept counting the seconds, measuring the silences, observing the micro-expressions, the way Liam's hands fidgeted near the edge of his plate, the almost imperceptible clenching of Emma's jaw. I remembered Robert's gentle guidance, his quiet reassurances, the way he had shielded me from hardships, and felt the absence of that protection acutely. And yet, I remained seated, unmoving, unprovoked, letting them reveal their true selves in the safety of my stillness, knowing that the storm of realization would come to them in time. The kitchen was quiet, the scent of brewed coffee mingling with the faint aroma of leftover roast from yesterday, the light from the early morning sun stretching across the countertops and warming the pale blue walls. Sonia moved deliberately, lining up the cups on the counter, each one placed with care, her hands steady as she traced the rims lightly. She paused at the window, watching the street below, noting the cars passing, the neighbors walking their dogs, the mail carrier making his usual rounds, yet none of it offered comfort. The silence of the house was heavier than any presence, pressing against her chest with a quiet insistence. She walked through the living room, fingers brushing over the spines of photo albums, the memories of decades layered within each page, the birthdays, holidays, and simple Sunday dinners, moments once filled with laughter and chatter now frozen in stillness. Emma had been awake early, the faint clatter from her kitchen audible even from across the hall, a soft hum that signaled preparation for the day, precise, calculated movements that Sonia had learned to read. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth ground her, tracing the grain of the wooden table, feeling the subtle ridges and imperfections, the echoes of years spent building a home together with Robert. She thought of Liam's hesitant movements the night before, the awkward silences, the words left unspoken yet heavily implied in every glance, every shift in his posture. The living room windows revealed the morning sun catching on the edges of the blinds, the light flickering across the patterned rug where the grandchildren used to play, their toys now neatly stored, an emptiness accentuated by absence. Sonia moved to the piano in the corner, the keys gleaming faintly, untouched for a week, and pressed her fingers against the cool surface, remembering the songs Robert would play, the soft melodies that had once filled the home with comfort and joy. She leaned back, letting herself feel the weight of solitude, each memory a reminder of what had been lost and what now remained. Her mind traced over the past weeks, the gentle gestures of Robert, the warmth of his hand in hers, and contrasted them with the cold efficiency of Emma's movements, Liam's avoidance, their careful orchestration of appearances that belied intentions. Sonia's breath was measured, her thoughts quiet but keen, cataloging small details, the slight hesitation in Emma's step, the way Liam avoided certain rooms, the timing of their actions, all forming a pattern, a narrative unfolding that she could see clearly now. She folded her hands in her lap, the mug resting between them, feeling the warmth seep through her fingers, grounding her, steadying her, and allowed herself to simply observe, to take in every nuance of the household that once felt alive, now simmering with subtle tension. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, a gentle reminder of the world continuing despite the stillness inside, and she let the moments stretch, each one a bead in a string of awareness, patience, and quiet determination. Sonia moved quietly through the hallway, the soft carpet under her feet muffling every step, her mind tracing the sequence of events from the past week with meticulous clarity. She paused outside Liam and Emma's bedroom, listening to the faint sounds of morning preparations, noting the deliberate pacing, the careful folding of linens, the muted clink of silverware, all of it a choreography of control that she now understood fully. Returning to the living room, she ran her fingers across the piano keys, the polished surface cool and unyielding beneath her touch, remembering the afternoons Robert had spent teaching her grandchildren simple melodies, the way his laughter had filled the house like sunlight through the windows. She traced her gaze to the photographs along the mantel, each frame a frozen testament to years of celebrations, birthdays, and anniversaries, and she allowed herself a long, steady breath, letting the weight of memory and loss settle into a quiet resolve. The dining table was set for breakfast, the plates gleaming in the early light, yet the emptiness around them amplified the absence of warmth and recognition. Sonia poured a cup of coffee, the dark liquid steaming and fragrant, and carried it to the window seat where she could observe the world beyond, the familiar street now seeming foreign in its indifference. Her thoughts traced over Liam's hesitant gestures, the way he had skirted the edges of conversation, and Emma's poised movements, precise and controlled, as if each action had been measured to manipulate and contain. Every detail mattered, every small omission, each carefully timed word or silence a part of a larger pattern that Sonia now catalogued with quiet acuity. She allowed herself a faint smile, not of joy but of acknowledgement, a recognition that she was fully aware of the dynamics at play and that patience, observation, and calm would be her instruments. The morning sunlight shifted across the living room floorboards, casting long shadows that danced slowly, echoing the rhythm of her own heartbeat, measured and deliberate. Sonia lifted the teacup, letting the warmth seep through her fingers, a tether to the tangible world as she reviewed the past weeks in her mind, noting inconsistencies, half-truths, and moments of subtle manipulation. She thought of Robert's voice, steady and kind, guiding her gently through difficulties, and she allowed that memory to fortify her present awareness, a quiet armor against the small betrayals that now unfolded around her. Her gaze lingered on the calendar by the door, the marked dates of family gatherings that had passed without acknowledgement, and she catalogued them silently, each missed occasion a note in the ledger of intent and character that she now read with precision. Sonia's breathing remained even, her posture composed, every movement controlled, each step a conscious act of presence, of quiet vigilance. Outside, the wind carried the scent of blooming magnolias from the neighbor's yard, a reminder of continuity and cycles, while inside, the house held its own rhythm, the stillness a canvas upon which she painted awareness, patience, and deliberate observation, preparing herself for the moments yet to come. Sonia walked toward the study, her footsteps slow and deliberate, the hardwood floor cool under her slippers, reflecting the morning sunlight that streamed through the partially drawn blinds. She paused by the bookshelves, running her fingers across the spines of worn novels and photo albums, each one holding fragments of memory from years of family celebrations, vacations, and quiet evenings with Robert. The silence of the house was almost tactile, pressing gently yet persistently against her senses, heightening her awareness of every small sound, every shift in the atmosphere. From the kitchen, she could hear Emma moving about, the faint scrape of chair legs against the floor, the subtle clink of utensils, each motion deliberate and calculated, a pattern she had learned to read. Sonia poured herself another cup of coffee, the aroma grounding her as she carried it to the window seat, her eyes tracing the familiar street below where neighbors walked their dogs and children played on the sidewalks, life continuing outside while her own world felt suspended. She reflected on the past months, the moments of quiet care from Robert, his steady presence that had anchored her through decades of marriage, now absent, leaving a void filled with subtle tensions and small betrayals. The photographs on the walls, the framed memories of birthdays and holidays, seemed to hold a different weight now, each one a reminder of the love that had existed and the careful strategies of omission and manipulation that now surrounded her. Sonia's gaze lingered on the kitchen clock, its hands moving steadily, marking the passage of time, yet her own internal clock measured patience, observation, and calculation. She noted the arrangement of the breakfast table, the unspoken communication between Liam and Emma, the subtle cues that indicated planning and intention behind every action. A faint breeze stirred the curtains, and Sonia allowed herself a quiet moment to breathe, the warmth of the coffee seeping into her hands, connecting her to the tangible world as she catalogued the dynamics unfolding around her. Every detail mattered, the hesitation in Liam's movements, the precise gestures of Emma, the timing of their conversations, all pieces of a puzzle she was piecing together with deliberate care. She recalled the soft tones of Robert's voice, the guidance he had offered, the reassurance in his words, and let those memories fortify her resolve. Sonia's posture remained straight, her expression calm and measured, each breath a testament to her self-control and vigilance. She observed, she catalogued, and she waited, understanding that awareness and patience were as powerful as any direct response, and that in the quiet moments of reflection, she was preparing herself for the moments that would demand her action. Sonia moved toward the study desk, where stacks of mail and scattered papers formed a quiet testament to the life that had once been orderly. She sorted through them deliberately, separating bills from letters, cataloging every small item with precision, noting dates, signatures, and subtle irregularities, the minutiae of daily life that now revealed patterns of careful oversight and omission. A photograph slipped from the corner of a folder, and she picked it up, tracing the edges with her finger, recalling the smiles, the laughter, the warmth of shared moments that had once defined this household. She placed it carefully on the desk, upright, as if to preserve the memory while acknowledging the contrast of the current stillness and tension. Sonia moved to the kitchen window, looking out at the yard, the small garden beds where Robert had planted tulips and daffodils each spring, the scent of fresh soil mingling faintly with the morning air, a gentle reminder that life continued beyond the walls of the house. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, the distant sounds of neighbors beginning their day, all of it formed a backdrop against which she measured her observations, noting subtle shifts, the way Liam avoided the living room, the careful pace of Emma's footsteps. Sonia's eyes softened briefly as she thought of Chloe, her granddaughter, and the quiet understanding she had seen in her gaze, the small gestures of care that had not gone unnoticed. She sipped her coffee, the warmth filling her hands, steadying her, connecting her to the physical world even as her mind traced the labyrinth of intentions and actions that had unfolded in the days since Robert's passing. She reflected on each conversation, each awkward pause, each manipulated silence, assembling them in her mind with careful deliberation, allowing the full picture to emerge. The sunlight shifted across the floors, casting long shadows that moved slowly with the morning, highlighting the angles and corners of the rooms she had once filled with music and conversation. Sonia breathed deeply, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease, her posture straightening further, and she allowed herself to notice the small comforts, the smooth surface of the countertop, the subtle aroma of brewed coffee, the faint rustle of leaves outside, that reminded her of continuity and resilience. Each step she took through the house, each object she touched, Each detail she catalogued strengthened her awareness and sharpened her focus, a quiet accumulation of knowledge and preparation. She traced over patterns in recent interactions, noting the delicate balance of politeness and manipulation, the timing of words and gestures, and allowed herself a quiet sense of strategy, knowing that observation and patience were her allies. The room seemed to hum softly around her, a muted acknowledgement of life going on while she held the stillness, the awareness, the quiet power of a woman who had learned to watch, to wait, and to gather her understanding before choosing the right moment for measured action. Sonia sat by the window, her coffee long finished but the warmth still lingering in her hands, letting her gaze drift over the familiar streets below. She observed the neighbors starting their day, the gentle sway of tree branches in the morning breeze, the distant hum of cars, and the rhythmic footsteps of children heading to school. Each movement outside seemed mundane yet carried a steady cadence that contrasted sharply with the subtle tension within her home. She returned to the living room and ran her fingers over the fabric of the couch where Robert used to sit, the material worn and familiar, comforting in its consistency, a silent witness to years of laughter, conversations, and quiet evenings. Sonia reflected on the meticulous patterns of Liam and Emma, the timing of their steps, the careful avoidance of certain rooms, the calculated placement of items that seemed insignificant but now spoke volumes. She opened the drawers in the sideboard, inspecting bills, letters, and receipts with precise attention, noting dates and amounts, small irregularities that painted a clearer picture with each detail. The sunlight shifted across the room, illuminating the edges of frames, the surfaces of tables, the slight dust that had settled in corners unnoticed for days. Sonia allowed herself a long, steady breath, feeling the rhythm of her own heart align with the measured observation of her surroundings, each beat a quiet testament to patience and awareness. She moved to the dining table, picking up a family photo from the last holiday gathering, tracing the contours of familiar faces with her fingertips, recalling their laughter and the warmth that had once filled the space. The contrast between that joy and the careful manipulation she now witnessed was stark, yet she absorbed it without reaction, letting the details settle into her mind as she built a framework for understanding. She noticed the subtle tensions in the air, the way the light caught on Liam's watch, the tilt of Emma's head, the way they exchanged glances without speaking, each moment reinforcing the narrative she had begun to see. Sonia walked slowly through the house, touching objects with deliberate care, each motion measured, each step a silent assertion of presence. The sound of her own breath, the faint rustle of the curtains in the morning breeze, the ticking of the wall clock, all blended into a quiet symphony that allowed her to catalogue the environment and the people within it without disturbance. She allowed herself to imagine how she would act when the moment was right, considering subtle adjustments, small interventions, choices that could shift the balance without confrontation. The house seemed to hold its own awareness, the memory of Robert's presence lingering in the spaces, guiding her calm deliberation, reinforcing the patience she knew would be her strongest ally. She felt a quiet certainty settle over her, a sense that observation, careful planning, and restraint would provide clarity and eventual influence, and she remained there, composed, aware, and steadily gathering insight into the patterns that had become evident in the days following Robert's passing. Sonia walked through the living room again, her steps measured and silent, her eyes scanning every detail with deliberate attention. She paused at the mantel, adjusting a framed photograph so that it faced perfectly forward, a subtle act of care in a room that had grown heavy with absence. The sunlight fell through the windows in narrow streams, illuminating dust motes that danced slowly in the air, each one catching her gaze for just a moment before drifting away. She moved to the dining table and lifted a folded napkin, smoothing it flat, arranging it alongside the china with precise care, noting how each element reflected the household's patterns, the traces of intention and order that spoke more than words could. Sonia took a slow breath, her mind reviewing the sequence of small gestures she had observed over the past week, the timing of Emma's actions, the careful avoidance in Liam's gaze, the subtle inflections in their speech, and catalogued them like notes in a ledger, each one reinforcing her awareness. She glanced at the clock, its hands moving steadily, marking the hours, while she measured her own rhythm in quiet observation, each beat aligned with a calm but alert state of mind. Her attention shifted to the bookshelf, where Robert's worn journals rested, their spines bent slightly from years of use. She ran her fingers along the edges, remembering the evenings spent reading together, the discussions about family, and the gentle guidance he had offered through decisions both small and significant. Sonia allowed herself a faint smile, not of amusement but of acknowledgement, a recognition that she was fully cognizant of the environment and the people within it, that every action she had witnessed had been logged and considered. She moved to the kitchen to retrieve another cup of coffee, noting the faint steam rising from the mug, carrying with it the subtle aroma that reminded her of ordinary mornings before tension and manipulation had begun to define the household. Standing by the window, she looked out at the street once more, observing children heading to school, neighbors chatting briefly across lawns, the familiar world continuing beyond the walls of her home, and she drew strength from the continuity of life, the constancy of small routines. Every detail she had catalogued, the gestures, the silences, the timing of words, formed a tapestry of understanding, a preparation for moments yet to come, and she stood there fully present, composed, her awareness sharpened, ready to respond with patience and deliberate intention when the time was right. Sonia returned to the living room, her eyes moving methodically over every surface, every item, cataloging subtle changes she had noticed over the past days. The sunlight now angled differently, catching the edges of picture frames, the surfaces of tables, and casting a gentle glow on the carpet where her grandchildren had once sprawled with toys and books, laughter echoing in distant memory. She ran her fingers over the arm of the sofa, noting the faint impressions left by daily use, and allowed herself a slow exhale, a quiet acknowledgement of presence in a space that had begun to feel estranged yet intimately familiar. The coffee table held magazines and letters, each carefully arranged or slightly shifted, telling a story she had begun to understand, the layering of intention, omission, and subtle communication. Sonia picked up a letter, turning it slowly in her hands, observing the folds, the handwriting, the date stamped in neat black ink, and traced each line of text with her gaze, noticing words left unsaid, the spaces between phrases as telling as the letters themselves. She moved to the window seat, the cushion beneath her still warm from the morning light, and looked out over the street, the neighborhood stirring with quiet activity, dogs barking in the distance, cars passing by with steady hums, neighbors greeting one another across lawns, life continuing uninterrupted outside her home. The house remained quiet, the only sounds being the faint ticking of the wall clock and the occasional creak of floorboards beneath her own measured steps. Sonia reflected on the interactions she had witnessed, the careful timing of gestures, the nuanced inflections of speech, the subtle management of space by Liam and Emma, and catalogued them with deliberate attention, the pieces forming a larger picture of character, intent, and strategy. She sipped from her cup, the warmth grounding her as she considered the pattern of days, the interplay of movement and silence, understanding that patience, observation, and quiet awareness provided insight and influence far beyond immediate reaction. The photographs on the mantel caught her eye, faces frozen in moments of joy and innocence, reminding her of the continuity of family beyond conflict, the permanence of memory despite current manipulations. She allowed herself to feel the calm of being fully present, every breath, every small gesture measured and intentional, a deliberate accumulation of knowledge and understanding. Sonia's awareness extended to the faint creases in linens, the alignment of dishes on the sideboard, the faint scent of Robert's cologne lingering in a quiet corner, the soft shadows cast by sunlight filtering through blinds, each detail contributing to her comprehension of the dynamics within the household. She remained poised, composed, her mind cataloging, analyzing, and observing, ready to act when the moment demanded measured attention, knowing that in stillness lay clarity, and in careful observation lay the quiet power to influence outcomes while maintaining dignity and control. Sonia stood in the quiet living room, the morning sun spilling through the windows and highlighting the subtle textures of the furniture, the faint shadows stretching across the floorboards like a gentle reminder of the passing hours. She ran her hand along the edge of the coffee table, feeling the smoothness under her fingers, tracing the memories of afternoons spent with Robert, sipping tea, talking softly about family plans and dreams that had seemed so certain. The subtle hum of life outside the house, the distant barking of a dog, the soft chatter of neighbors, the wheels of bicycles turning along the street, contrasted with the deliberate stillness inside, and she found a sense of calm in that difference. Her eyes moved over the photographs along the mantel, noting the smiles, the small gestures captured in frames, the moments of connection that had once filled the air with warmth, and she allowed herself to remember each one fully, absorbing both the joy and the quiet ache of absence. She walked to the bookshelf and lifted a journal, its leather cover worn, the pages slightly yellowed with age, and ran her fingers along the lines of neat handwriting, recalling Robert's gentle words, his guidance, and the subtle humor that had accompanied everyday life. Sonia set the journal down carefully and moved toward the kitchen, noticing the arrangement of utensils, the faint aroma of coffee, the sunlight catching on the surface of the counter, each detail contributing to the full understanding she had been building over days of careful observation. She paused at the window seat, looking out over the street, seeing the familiar routines of the neighborhood continuing uninterrupted, children heading to school, neighbors greeting one another across lawns, and she drew strength from the constancy, the small repetitions of life that reminded her that time moved forward even when hearts felt heavy. Her mind catalogued the interactions she had witnessed, noting the careful timing, the subtle shifts in expression, the ways in which Liam and Emma navigated the house and each other, all pieces of a larger pattern that revealed intention and character. Sonia took a slow, deliberate breath, allowing the warmth of the sun, the quiet of the house, and the grounding presence of memory to fill her senses, anchoring her in the present. She traced over each gesture, each word, each pause she had catalogued in recent days, weaving them together into a coherent understanding, a readiness for measured action when the right moment arrived. Her posture remained straight, her movements calm and deliberate, every glance and touch purposeful, a silent assertion of awareness and patience. She allowed the tension in her shoulders to ease slightly, acknowledging that knowledge, observation, and quiet preparation were as powerful as any overt response, and she remained there, fully attentive, poised, and resolute, understanding that the careful accumulation of awareness over time would guide her with clarity and control through the days yet to come.